We just need to go home.
I won't keep you if you wish to leave. But I want you to choose which door to go through based on your faith.
What does this have to do with us leaving?
Everything.
Are you asking us for us to deliberate our belief in the church?
A factor which will correspond to us going home?
I'm asking you to choose between belief and disbelief. My own claim is that all 10,000 verifiable religions that exist in the world today are as artificial as the symbolic church you're currently standing in. It is farce. There is nothing holy here. Your religious text is mere ornament, as hollow and as capitalistic as these ridiculous games.
We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits as far as they're concerned. In fact, we're going to put the goons to sleep. Meanwhile, we dig.
Here we go again.
Greetings and welcome to the Anadrome. This is Burn Power coming to you from Tbilisi, Georgia, which may not be a place many of you are familiar with. It is not somewhere between Athens and Savannah, but it is closer to Athens, Greece. Well, what are we doing today? We are going to finally do my top 10 horror films of 2024. I have waited for a very specific reason, and that is that I feel like I needed to catch up. There were 3 or 4 films I wanted to catch up on before I did this. I have certain rules that I go by. One of them is I either watch films in the theater or I get them on physical media. And I am allergic to streaming. Streaming to me is helping to kill the value of movies. Not that there aren't movies worth watching, it's just that convenience kills. And I'm not going to go any further into that. If you want more of those kinds of ideas, go to my Anadromist channel where I stick all of my ideas for good or ill. Well, the interesting thing is that several of the films I was waiting to see, you may remember I did a video a couple months ago about why 2024 might go down as one of the best years in horror film history. And I'm not going to go all over that again, but what happened was there were several films I was waiting to see that made it on this list. In fact, if you were to ask me what my favorite film was at that moment, I would not have given you the film that ended up on the top of the list. And in fact, I hadn't seen 4 of the 5 films in my top 5. And so I had a more predictable list up until this point. So let's get right to the top 10, and I will come back and give you my also rans, my worth a mention films after this. Again, I did not see all these films that are kind of cluttering up the streaming services, although there were a few mentioned that I really wanted to see. One was the film Mads, which was a French film, which was streaming. I can't even find a reference to it in Wikipedia. It's that obscure at the moment. But people who saw it thought it was amazing. So maybe one day I'll see that. Also, I haven't seen In a Violent Nature yet, which is a film I really do want to see, but I felt I could wait on it. It seems to be a first-person view of what if you were Jason, or Michael Myers or something, which strikes me as interesting, but at the same time, yeah, I can wait on that. Also, there were some films, if I was just going by the films I saw that were new to me this year from 2023, so we're talking 2024 films now, but 2023, there are some films that I picked up on late from 2023, which were amazing, including When Evil Lurks and Godzilla -1. Both of those, When Evil Lurks would be my favorite film of 2023 now, and Godzilla -1 would be my third favorite film now, neither of which were a part of the equation when 2023 ended. Godzilla -1 did come to Tbilisi. See, this is one of the problems I have, is Tbilisi doesn't get every horror film. So they didn't get any of the Terrifier movies. They didn't get, if it's a more obscure film, they're probably not going to get it. But they did get Godzilla -1, and they put it in their IMAX theater. Great. With English subtitles. Great. 10:30 at night. And buses stop running at midnight. And the IMAX theater is about 15 miles away from here. I just couldn't do it. I didn't want to take a taxi home. In fact, taxis after about 1 o'clock in the morning get kind of iffy anyway here. So that, I just said, no, sorry, I'll have to wait. And I finally caught up with it last week. And I thought, wow, this is really great. I wish I had seen it in the theater, in the IMAX theater. So there are a few films, as I just mentioned, that I missed from this year, such as life. You can't see everything. I'm not one of these people who has to be a completist. There are some reviewers I've seen who've gone through every horror film that they saw in the year. You know what I do is I go to people like that. I watch their videos and say, okay, I don't have to watch that. That doesn't interest me. That doesn't sound good. And so I just go for the things I feel that other reviewers talk about that are meaningful in some sense to me. Either the plot, the subject, the quality of the film somehow matters to me. And sometimes there'll be a theme I just go, no, that's not a theme I'm particularly interested in. So, without any further ado, here are my top 10 in reverse order. Number 10, The First Omen. And like many people, I was expecting zip from this film. Nothing. Nada. No. I was expecting this to be a perfunctory, by-the-numbers sequel. Similar to, Apartment 9A, that was a prequel, rather, to Rosemary's Baby that came out last year, which came and went, and no one will remember it worth much. But this film was quite interesting, and it was directed by Arkasha Stevenson, and it starred Nell Tiger-Free in a very, very powerful performance. Obviously, in the future, she will become an actress that we watch. So, that film, it really dovetailed into the beginning of the Omen movies. My feeling about the Omen franchise is there's one movie, The Omen, that they actually made twice. that is the remake of The Omen is simply the remake of The Omen and was pointless. Why would you want to remake it step for step? But this film had a real mood and attitude. It felt like a 70s film in many ways, and yet it had something extra. And so, number 10, The First Omen. Number 9 was an odd film, indeed. Odd is in the title. Oddity, it's called. It's directed by Damien McCarthy. The first of 2 Damiens on this list. 3 if you count The Omen, but that's another story. And it stars Carolyn Bracken, an Irish film. She plays 2 roles in the film. Now, this is a mood piece. It has some very unsettling details in it, particularly the use of what they call the mannequin. It's a very strange-looking creature. And there's something in this film that is quite mysterious. quite dark. And I thought it was really well done. Now, this isn't the kind of film that's going to appeal to people looking for a slasher film or looking for some sort of haunted house film, although maybe, if you like subtle stuff. But this is a very subtle film. And like I say, it's Irish and it has this different sensibility to it. And the oddity is really interesting. So I highly recommend that. So that's my number 9. Number 8, just to change it up, is the most purely entertaining film on my list. I recommended this to a friend of mine, James Wallace, who really likes horror films, particularly from the 70s. He didn't like it, but a lot of people did. It has a very peculiar sensibility to it. Some people have called it action horror. It's Abigail. And it's a film directed by the Matt Bertinelli Olpin and Tyler Gillette. And it stars Melissa Barrera, Dan Stevens, Catherine Newton, who all are, and the rest of the cast all do a great job. Great ensemble piece, but huge shout out to Alicia Weir, who, again, this film was also shot in Ireland. I think there's something going on there, although it's a very American film. But Alicia Weir is a young Irish actress, and she just knocks it out of the park. And she can shift between being kind of the sympathetic young girl and the bloodthirsty vampire. Sorry for spoiling it, but they did that with the whole promotion. This is a case where, why did you spoil the film before we got in there? There was a way of making the film poster and the film trailer without giving away the fact that it was a vampire film. And because the least you know, the better. But, such is life. If you're here, you're probably already invested in it. So it doesn't matter that it's a vampire film. I thought that was just purely enjoyable. It wasn't a deep film. Some of these films here have a lot more depth and thought to them. But it was, I just thought, purely enjoyable as a horror film. Yeah, you got moments where things pop out at you. But great characters, I felt, in this kind of entertaining mode. And then there's Late Night with the Devil, a film made actually in Australia, but set in an American talk show in the 1970s with Davis see if I can say this correctly, Davis Dastmalchian, which is actually a Persian name, I found out, doing a great job as the central host of the show. And this was directed by a couple of brothers, Colin and Cameron Cairns. And that's an interesting thing. This is the second time we've mentioned 2 people directing a film, and it won't be the last. What have the Coen brothers done to us? Some good things, evidently. But Late Night with the Devil is a very surprising film. It is a found footage film in a certain mode. Some people have complained, how could they have, all that backstage footage? And they didn't realize that, well, isn't the whole film, wasn't it being shot as a documentary as well as being filmed at the same time? If you listen to the beginning of the movie, you hear that. So I don't really get that criticism. You could always, Alfred Hitchcock used to talk about these people who watch films. He called them the plausibles. They always want a plausible reason why something happens. And for Alfred Hitchcock, the plausible reason for something to happen is so that someone gets murdered, is so that something goes boo. That's the reason for it. And if you're looking for all this story plot stuff, he just didn't care. And a lot of directors are like that. They want the thing to happen. Now, there are people in the audience, especially these days, where everybody's a critic and everyone has their opinion, and they're all going like, well, that wasn't fully 100% logical. And I'm more with Alfred Hitchcock. I don't really care that much. I care that the effect, the symbolic image, comes across strong. I'm interested more in the symbols, the metaphors, the meaning of the piece than I am in every drop of story logic. Having said that, we come to my number 6 film. Now, this could be weird to some people because this film shows up as number 1, 2, or 3 in most people's list, but I've got it down at number 6 because I consider the 5 films above it better. And that's The Substance. The Substance is so revered that Demi Moore, I'm making this before the Oscars, she's kind of a good shot for getting that Oscar. Coralie Fargeat did a great job of editing. This is a triumph of style, first of all, and Coralie Fargeat does that. Interestingly enough, many people have talked about how this film goes kind of over the edge, and it loses people in its third act. If you've seen the film, you know. If you've seen her first film called Revenge, she does the same thing there. The third act of the film is just totally over the top. I don't know. You need some sort of massive vat of blood to just come in and dump on everything. And in this one, it's like the people in the makeup department were told, okay, just go crazy. And they went crazy. I think that ending is really good and at the same time stops it from being a perfect film. To my sensibilities, and but nevertheless, what a great film, and I think a very important film, raising questions about our relationship, our increasingly troubled relationship to the body. It asks essentially, what are we doing to ourselves? I just saw Megyn Kelly interviewing this guy named Brian Johnson. And he's evidently some guy who has way too much money and is trying to reverse his aging, going through all these processes, taking all these supplements. And I'm wondering, I hear about all these supplements people are taking. I'm wondering, are we totally becoming dependent on technology to live? And the answer is, of course, yes. As Jacques Ellul said, we are living within the host of technology now. We are no longer in nature. We are no longer in society. We are within technology. Personally, I don't want to be that far into technology. And it seemed like this guy had, there are before and after pictures where he's becoming younger and younger from what he was 5 years ago. And many of the people in the comment section said he looks like a vampire, which I think is a very interesting observation in light of some of the other things I might say here. I think it is a very perceptive film about our, particularly women's, issues with the body, which have only been exacerbated by our smartphone and screenal technology. We have essentially allowed the images we see of ourselves online to become this fiction we live within. And again, in this movie, the main actress is someone who appears on a screen. And she has been told at 50, she is, over the edge. Demi Moore does indeed play an amazing character here, and I think she probably should win the Academy Award. Dennis Quaid is so repulsive, just amazingly repulsive. If you watch this film, you will never hear anyone lick their lips or suck their fingers again the same way. And Margaret Qualley does a very good job allowing herself to be the object of desire. I recommend seeing it. Be warned, if you're not a fan of body horror, this film is not for you. An even stronger warning goes with film number 5, which is Terrifier 3 by Damien Leone. I told you another Damien would show up here. A special shout out has to go here to David Howard Thornton, who's not only wearing clown makeup, very disturbing clown makeup, but is actually doing very excellent clowning. His mannerisms, his exaggerations, his ability to stop and take a pose. In a very weird sort of way, we have destroyed the image of the clown, turning the clown into a demonic figure. And at the same time, the clown is coming back as that figure and as a clown. I feel really sad for my friends, and I have met several friends in my lifetime who have been clowns of one sort or another. I feel very sad for them because their traditional métier of going and entertaining children is being spoiled by all of this. But I suppose I'm reading a book, I'm almost done with it now, by Paul Boisiac out of University of Toronto. He's about 95 years old right now, but it's called The End of the Circus. And there are three main pillars to the traditional circus. One is the animal acts, two is the clown, and three are the physical feats and acrobatics and things like that. He really questions why the animal activist groups have gone after the animal acts. And he has some very interesting observations in a kind of a semiotic sense. And part of it is we no longer know what animals even are. We see most of them on the screen. And part of it is the people who claim to speak for animals have anthropomorphized them to being like us and no longer have any sense that predators even have any sense of danger to them. Having lived in Alaska for 22 years before moving here, I can tell you with absolute certainty, when you're walking through the forest in Alaska, you are no longer on top of the food chain, unless you have a gun. So, he talks about our strange relationship to animals. Then he talks about the clown and how the clown has been morphing from a figure of amusement and fun, temporary fun, into this strange, new, frightening creature. But he does go back into the past and point out connections with this other set of images. And that's really interesting. I will eventually make a video about this. And then Lauren Levera plays this figure. Her name is Sienna, and she is this really angelic warrior character. Now, when I saw this, I was just really impressed. Right before that, a month or two before it came out, it didn't come out here. I didn't think it would. I watched all of the material related to Art the Clown, All Hallows Eve, Terrifier, and Terrifier 2. And as I was watching along, I became increasingly impressed as I went along. But after watching number 3, I just was like, that's a great movie with a great theme, and it is grand guignol. It is both darkly comic, and yet there is a core of meaning to it. And as I said in my big review of it, which is also on this channel, it's probably a more Catholic film in many ways than Conclave is. So, but you should go watch that if you want my full take on it. Now, number 4 is the last film I saw on this list. And it is a French-Canadian film called Red Rooms, Les Chambres Rouges, which is directed by Pascal Plante and stars Juliette Gariapi in a role which, if this woman does not become a great actress that everybody recognizes, I would be very surprised. And in fact, very few people have ever seen this film or even heard of it. You have to be really interested in horror and be part of, quote unquote, the horror community. I don't believe in online communities whatsoever. So, but nevertheless, a film about a woman who's obsessed with a trial about a man who is committing these acts of savage atrocity through a channel on the dark web. I'm not going to go into describing it all. Very little is shown. But this film is unnerving, not for what is shown, but for the intensity of Juliette's character in this film. And one of the things, all the way up until the end, I was trying to guess what her motivation was. And the actress does this. Someone said this film out-Finchers David Fincher. And I would agree. There's this cold, distant tone to the whole thing. Then again, Canada, particularly Montreal, is a great place to set cold, distant sorts of things. I mean, because Canada spends so much of the year in a colder, cooler, more blue environment. But again, the subject matter of this is what makes it horrifying. Some people say, well, it's really a thriller. What's a thriller? I don't know. This film, to me, was a horror film. And I think horror has more boundaries. Thrillers are just, they could be anything. So it's a waffly definition. Horror is not. And so for me, this was a horror film, especially, just the sound. The whole film was completely horrifying and unnerving without showing you much at all. Number 3, Longlegs by Osgood Perkins. I just saw his movie The Monkey, which seems to be set in the same universe, so to speak, this dark, depressing universe, autumnal universe. A lot of these films have this sort of tone. We're in this kind of gray mode for so many films these days. Or is it the really bad projection here in Tbilisi? But no, when I get the movies on Blu-ray or whatever, they still look kind of dark and depressing. Micah Monroe, Alicia Witt, who I haven't seen for a while. I've been noticing her ever since this kind of very forgotten, crazy psycho girl film called Fun that came out about 1993, which I highly recommend looking for if you've never seen it. And Nicolas Cage, almost unrecognizable, playing one of the weirdest, quirkiest characters. I think his character wants to be a doll. And dolls figure heavily in this film. This is, again, another mood piece, but it is a really unnerving mood piece. And it earns my respect. I saw The Substance right after I saw this, and The Substance for a while I considered a better film. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I'll go back and watch The Substance again, and I'll enjoy that. But Longlegs sticks its talons into me. It sticks its claws into me and won't let go. And that, to me, is a film I've got to spend more time with. Then we come to my top 2 now. Number 2, what do you think number 2 is? Nosferatu, Robert Eggers' new film. For purely beautiful cinematography, which ironically wasn't nominated for the Academy Awards, Nosferatu is absolutely gorgeous. And the mood in it, again, another dark film, but visually dark. They don't let you see the Bill Skarsgård Nosferatu character until it's like slowly an accumulation of pieces. And you don't really see him until the very horrifying end. Horrifying, and yet at the same time somewhat touching. Very, very odd moods this is hitting. Lily Rose Depp's character is absolutely unforgettable. I'd never really seen her in a film prior to this, and suddenly she's doing things again. Horror films don't get nominated for many awards, as every horror fan could tell you that Toni Collette should have won the Academy Award for Hereditary back in, 2017 or something. And not a peep from the Oscar people. Nicholas Hoult does a good job with the rather thankless role, the one that Keanu Reeves massacred in Bram Stoker's Dracula, the 90s Coppola film. But Nicholas Hoult did a very good job with that in this, that kind of the guy who has to go visit Dracula guy. And essentially this film is a variation on the Dracula film. But since I know the original 1922 film pretty well, and in fact I watched both it and the Werner Herzog film before watching this, I was really impressed by how faithfully Robert Eggers hewed to the original line of Nosferatu. And what I liked is he didn't try to give us the subverted trope version, the subverted expectations version. He gave us the real thing. He expanded on the original rather than contracted or diverted it off to another line. Because he knows very well most people have never seen the original. And in fact, I was talking to someone recently who said, yeah, it was almost as good as the one done in the 70s. And I said, you do know there's one before that? And they said, no, I had no idea. So, yeah. And in fact, Lily Rose Depp does kind of harken back to Isabelle Adjani's take on the character in Herzog's 1970s version. An absolutely beautiful film with some sometimes very disturbing stuff. Willem Dafoe is in this, does his usual stellar job, quirky, stellar job. And finally, we come to my number one. What is it? What could it be, Bern? Heretic, which I only saw about 3 weeks ago for the first time. I got the Blu-ray in, immediately watched it, immediately wanted to rewatch it. And this is done by the directing team of Scott Beck and Brian Wood. And it stars Hugh Grant, who should be up for the Academy Award for this and should win it, but he's not going to. He does an amazing job taking his usual, formerly charming personality and using the charm for evil intent, which makes you realize something about psychopaths, how they're able to manipulate people through charm. But also, I'd like to point out the actresses here. Sophie Thatcher, who I think we're going to be seeing a whole lot more of. She was also in the movie that came out just a few weeks back called Companion, which is also a horror film of sorts. She just does a great job of conveying emotion and intelligence. And then Chloe East, whom I'd never heard of before seeing Heretic. What's interesting about her in this film is she starts off being the innocent, naive proselytizer for the Mormon church, and they're both going out together as a pair of missionaries. Mormons do this when they hit their young 20s or so. And she starts off just being so naive and always hopeful, always optimistic, always saying, well, maybe this will happen, maybe that will happen. And then by the end of it, it's just, she suddenly realizes how dark the world can get. And her character changes in accord with learning that. I thought the acting was stellar from all three of them. And the reason this was number one for me is because it did something all the rest of these films didn't do. It managed to convey a sense of horror and tension through words alone. Cinematography was great. This fluid dolly shots by the Korean cinematographer. I can't remember his name offhand. Maybe I'll put it up here somewhere. The film rests on this discussion about the nature of religion. Now, being a Christian myself, I was really fascinated by the conversation. And, of course, not being naive, like these two young girls who are one more so than the other. The Sophie Thatcher character was less naive than the Chloe East character. But I felt that it's the kind of thing, as soon as you're done watching it, you want to talk to somebody. And in fact, I invited a few friends over. I had 3 friends over a couple nights ago, and we watched it. And immediately, I had a friend who had to leave in an hour or so. He says, I wish I didn't have to go. This is all such an interesting discussion. So, for me, I think everyone who says they are a Christian or a Muslim or a Mormon or a Jew or a Buddhist or whatever should watch this and discuss it afterwards. Now, I have my own thoughts. I'm not going to go into it here. And it's not a perfect film. No film is perfect. But I felt like the reason it was so important to me was because it was breaking new ground that needs to be continually opened up. And that is the ground of really asking the questions of who we are in this time. And I felt this film, as much as the film made you want to doubt, it also made you want to believe. And it showed you that this world is not as predictable as it is often made out to be. So, we'll stop. There's my top 10. Let me give you just a little bit of some of the other films that were worth my time this year. So, some of the other films I saw this year, just quickly running through them that I really felt were worth a watch. Stop Motion by Robert Morgan, starring Aileen Franciosa. A film about a woman who inherits her mother's stop-motion animation studio. And for many people, this is one of the most unnerving films they've ever seen. And the reason for that is the stop-motion animation characters in this film look like they're made out of like melting chunks of fleshy clay or something. It's not a claymation film, but it just has this unusual resonance. And also, of course, what they're doing. Strange Darling by J.T. Molnar, also an interesting film. Great performances by Willa Fitzgerald and Kyle Gallner. And a very interesting broken narrative where you go from one time to another, certainly non-linear, and you don't know who's doing what, but excellent acting, excellent tension in this film. Serial killer type of film. Immaculate by Michael Moen, which is starring and produced by Sydney Sweeney, and I thought Sydney Sweeney did a great job here, especially by the end. She takes you to places you didn't know she would go. A Quiet Place Day One, starring Lupita Nyong'o, was directed by Michael Sarnowski, from a script or a story by John Krasinski, who directed and starred in the original Quiet Place. And I felt this was probably better than number 2. I think Quiet Place, the first one, is better, but this one focuses very different location, and it kind of tugs at your heartstrings, and at the same time, completely scary. The monsters are easily, the aliens are easily some of the most unnerving aliens ever. Speaking of aliens, Alien Romulus. Now, some people really love this, and other people really didn't. And their reasons for really doing either have to do with things like callbacks to other movies. Some people really liked the callbacks. Some people liked the fact that this was a return more to the original Alien haunted house in outer space sort of idea. But one thing everyone seems to have disliked is the use of certain digital imagery to deepfake someone from the past who was in the original Alien movie. I didn't mind, personally, because my feeling was, well, that person wasn't human to begin with. So this was directed by Fede Alvarez, who did the rather bloody version of Evil Dead that came out, 2013 or so. Stars Kaylee Spaney, who was also in Civil War this year, and which would be in my top 10 if I was doing but I'm not going to do that for the channel because I've talked too much about films. I need to get back to music. She's an actress to keep an eye on. Smile 2. Now, I kind of like the Smile movie, and I kind of like this one. Neither one is super connected to, but I will admit this one is directed by Parker Finn, who did the original Smile, and it is also starring Naomi Scott. Her performance in this was, I think, pretty interesting to watch. Some people really love it again, and other people are less warm about it. I just felt it was engaging, and I didn't mind it. And I thought the ending of this was fascinating and presented some fascinating thoughts about social contagion. So, what else do we have here? Oh, yeah. There's Cuckoo. And Cuckoo is a strange film. It's directed by Tillman Singer, starring, Hunter Schafer. I don't know how I think about this film. All I can tell you is it has something to do with birds. And it's not pleasant. Werebirds? Can we use that phrase? Although you don't see it in that manner. But the word cuckoo in the title is not simply someone who's insane. Then there's Maxine, the third part of Ty West's trilogy, and stars Mia Goth again and Elizabeth Debicki, depends on, it should be Debicki because it's Polish, but I'm pretty sure she's going by the Australian and American English pronunciation, which is to make it Debicki. Good film. I thought it was solid. It wasn't as good as the previous two entries, Pearl and X. There was a horror comedy, Lisa Frankenstein. That was pretty good, starring Catherine Newton, who shows up also in Abigail. She does a very good job in both of these. And then, of course, there was, almost not at all horror, Beetlejuice, Tim Burton's. But it wasn't a bad sequel. It was pretty good. Tried to pack a bit too much in, and you can tell by how many people are in the cast here. Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, Catherine O'Hara, Monica Bellucci, kind of wasted in the film, Jenna Ortega and Willem Dafoe, among others. A bit overstuffed, but enjoyable. I mean, it was kind of Saturday matinee stuff, the kind of thing I would go see as a kid. Saturday mornings and afternoons, you'd go watch a movie at the local theater. It's a good movie for that. So, now, let's look at the trends of the last year. And this is, again, I'm not going to spend too much time. If you want more of my thoughts about the trends of the year, see my film about whether this was the best year for horror films or not. So here are a few of my thoughts about the trends of the year. First of all, there were 3 films featuring women giving birth. I forgot to mention the movie Azrael, starring Samara Weaving, which is a really bizarre film set after the Rapture, the Christian Rapture. A very odd film here. Is this actually a Christian film about the Rapture? I don't think so. But its final conclusion does fit in with certain premillennial ideas about the Rapture. We'll just say that. So, 3 films featuring women giving birth to demonic babies, which tells us something about people's relationship to birth these days and children. 3 of these films had directors' teams. That's an interesting trend, that you have more than one director working on 3 different films that were important to the year. 3 in my top 10. We had, vampires are officially back, and they are not pretty. And I think this starts back with 2023's Voyage of the Demeter. I think also that Nosferatu feels like it was part of that world in a sense, that a more stylized version of the past, the Hollywood version, you could say, Robert Eggers' very lush cinematography. But unlike Francis Ford Coppola's version, there is a bit of romanticism in Nosferatu, but it is not like this romantic thing. We're not going back to Twilight eventually. We're leaving Twilight. We're saying farewell to the romantic, suave, debonair vampire, the great-grandchildren of Bela Lugosi, the grandchildren of Christopher Lee. And then, of course, Abigail, which Abigail is both a young, innocent girl, supposedly, and a vicious vampire with really bad teeth. Very much the dark Nosferatu, rat-like vampire. The original Nosferatu feels like you're watching rats, not vampires. Let's see, what else we got? 4 films featuring masked or doll-like creatures, and we call Art the Clown kind of a masked creature, but we have also mannequins and stop-motion puppets and the dolls in long legs. And I think this is very important, just as we have the new Megan film coming out this year, and we had Megan from a couple of years ago. I think these are very important. People are starting to say, oh, we're getting too many of these films. Well, there's a reason why we're getting more of these films. It's the same reason that there are films like The Body, is because we don't know what it means to be human anymore, and we are asking ourselves these questions. We are afraid that the dividing line between the doll and the human, the AI and the human, will be obliterated. And so we are trying to shake ourselves awake to that fact. Also, there were 5 films that featured serial killers of some sort. There were more. I'm pretty sure In a Violent Nature would be the 6. There were 5 films with serious technological issues related to DNA, related to the various devices. So the substance is a technology film. The substance is a psychochemical technology. So this is something that's also on us. AI is something that's going to become, we just had Companion, which is a film also. Again, similar issues. Are we becoming cyber humans, androids? What is the dividing line between the partially human and the fully human? All of these are very important. The serial killer thing is more of an older idea from the 60s through the 90s. But these ones featuring dolls and technology, that's about us now. There were 6 films in the best of films of the year that featured Christian and religious themes. Whether it's the Catholic imagery of Immaculate and the First Omen, or whether it is the challenge to the religious nature in Heretic. That's a very important thing, because it also is asking the question, which way do we go? It seems like atheism has let us down. It has pushed us into a cul-de-sac where everything is a fluke. But is there any value to religion? And these films are asking that question. They are all very ambiguous on the issue. I think many people today, from a certain mindset, when they hear the word religion, they tend to use it with a little bit of a stank on the end of the word. Oh, he's religious, There were 7 films featuring demons, demonic characters. And if you add the 2 vampire films, those are very much the demonic end of the vampire. And there were 18 films of the ones I've mentioned here that featured women in a central role, whether as heroine or as nightmare, as the evil creature herself. Not so much the final girl anymore, as the person who has to fight. Why is that happening? Horror has never been known as a female genre. It's been more guys who have supported it and still do. But I think that what has happened to women in the 21st century, the definitions of what a woman is, creates this tension that has to be explored. I think men need to make a comeback, but the question is, what is a woman? The question usually isn't what is a man, because everyone knows kind of what a man is. Men kind of like, I'm a man, we're kind of stupid that way. But those are just some of the trends I noticed. Maybe you noticed more, or maybe you have thoughts. What were, if you watched horror films, what were some of your favorites this year and why? Write it in the comments. And by the way, I do have a book of my 3 strange puppet plays that's available to support the channel. $25 will get you the book, and we'll send it to you. And let's see, what else do you need to know? That's it, except thank you for watching. I appreciate you spending your time with me. And here in Georgia, we say draw a beat, which means temporarily. We'll just be gone from each other a little while, and then we will meet again.
When I go, I want you to give me 5 minutes. I told you boys I'm no escape artist. For the first time, I like the odds.
At the round earth's imagined corners, blow your trumpets, angels, and arise, arise from death, you numberless infinities of souls.